My name is Marie, and I am 61 years old. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer, and I spent the next 24 months fighting for my life. I went through surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, and endless hospital visits. I lost my hair, my strength, and at times my hope. But I survived. The cancer is gone. I won. But here is what nobody tells you about winning. Sometimes the battle reveals who was never really on your side to begin with. My son never came. Not once. Not my daughter-in-law. Not even my 6-year-old grandson. But just a few weeks ago, my daughter-in-law showed up at my door uninvited, smiling like we were old friends. Before I tell you what happened when I opened that door, I would love to know where you are watching this from. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you have ever felt abandoned by the people who are supposed to love you most, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because this story is about learning when to let go and when to stand your ground. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment everything I thought I knew about family started to fall apart. I lived in Portland, Maine for most of my adult life. It is a quiet city, the kind of place where people know their neighbors, and the pace of life feels manageable. I had been a widow for 12 years. My husband Walter died in a car accident back in 2012. It was sudden, devastating, and it took me years to find any sense of normal again. But I did. I built a life. I had my son Brian, who was 35 years old when all of this began. He had married a woman named Cynthia 8 years prior, and together they had a son, my only grandson Tyler, who was 6 years old at the time. For years we were close. I thought we were anyway. Every Sunday we would have dinner together. I would cook pot roast or lasagna, and Brian would bring wine. Cynthia would talk about her week, and Tyler would run around the living room showing me his drawings from school. I watched Tyler 2 afternoons a week while Brian and Cynthia worked. I was there for every birthday party, every holiday, every school performance. We celebrated Thanksgiving together. Christmas mornings were spent at my apartment opening presents and drinking hot chocolate. I thought I was a part of their lives. I thought I mattered. I had worked as a nurse at Maine Medical Center for 33 years. It was hard work, long shifts, and emotionally exhausting, but I loved it. I retired at 59, 2 years before the cancer diagnosis. I wanted to spend more time with Tyler, to travel a little, to finally read all the books stacked on my nightstand. I had a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the heart of Portland. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. It was paid off, comfortable, and filled with memories of Walter and the life we had built. I also had a brother named Harold. He lived in California, in San Diego to be exact. We were not particularly close in terms of seeing each other often. The distance made that difficult. But we talked on the phone once a month, sometimes more. Harold had never married. He had been divorced years ago and never had children. He worked in commercial real estate and lived a quiet, private life. I loved my brother, but I had no idea just how much he had done for himself financially. He was humble, never one to flaunt wealth or talk about money. Now I need to talk about Cynthia, because understanding her is key to understanding what happened later. When Brian first introduced her to me, I thought she was lovely. She was polite, well-spoken, and seemed to genuinely care about my son. But over the years, I started to notice things. Small things at first. The way she would steer conversations toward money. How she always seemed interested in who owned what. How much houses in certain neighborhoods cost, what kind of cars people drove. She worked in real estate, so I assumed it was just professional interest. But it felt like more than that. There were moments when Cynthia would suggest in passing that I should think about selling my apartment. She would say things like, "You know, Marie, you could get a good price for this place. You could move in with us. We have the space. It would save you so much money." At first I thought it was kind, but then I realized she was not worried about me. She was worried about what would happen to my money, my assets, when I was gone. She wanted control. She wanted access. I refused every time, politely but firmly. I valued my independence. I had worked my whole life to have a space of my own, and I was not about to give that up. Brian, for his part, seemed oblivious. He was busy with work. He was a software engineer at a tech company, and his job demanded a lot of his time. Late nights, weekend projects, constant deadlines. I understood. I had raised him to be hardworking and responsible. But somewhere along the way, he stopped making time for me. Our Sunday dinners became every other week, then once a month, then hardly at all. When I brought it up, he would say, "Mom, I am just so swamped. We will make it up to you." But they never did. And then in August of 2022, everything changed. I was getting ready for bed one night when I noticed a lump in my left breast. I had done self-exams for years. It was part of my routine as a nurse. But this time, I felt something. It was small, firm, and it had not been there before. My heart sank. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. A cyst, hormones, anything but what I feared it might be. But I knew better. I had seen too many cases in my career to ignore it. The next morning, I called my doctor. They scheduled a mammogram and an ultrasound for the following week. The waiting was torture. I did not tell Brian right away. I did not want to worry him until I knew for sure. The tests came back suspicious. They recommended a biopsy. I went through with it alone, telling myself I was being strong. A week later, my doctor called me into her office. She did not sugarcoat it. The biopsy confirmed stage 2 breast cancer. It was aggressive. I would need surgery to remove the tumor, followed by chemotherapy and possibly radiation. I sat in that office staring at the diagrams she showed me, listening to words like lumpectomy and lymph nodes and treatment plan. I felt numb. I had cared for cancer patients my entire career. I had held their hands, administered their medications, sat with them during their darkest moments. But I never imagined I would be the one in that chair. When I left the office, I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried. Not because I was afraid to die, but because I suddenly realized how alone I felt. I called Brian that evening. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. He picked up on the third ring. "Mom," he said, "what is up?" I took a deep breath and told him. "Brian, I have cancer. Breast cancer. I need surgery and chemo." There was silence on the other end. Then he said, "Oh, Mom. Oh, no. I am so sorry. Are you okay?" I told him I did not know yet, that I was scared, that I needed him. He said, "Of course. We will be there for you. I promise. Do not worry. We will figure this out together." I believed him. I hung up feeling a little lighter, a little less alone. The surgery was scheduled for mid-September, about 3 weeks away. I started preparing. I read everything I could about breast cancer treatment options, survival rates. I bought a journal to track my appointments and symptoms. I told a few close friends, including a woman named Judith, whom I had met years earlier at a book club. Judith had survived ovarian cancer and had become something of a mentor to me in those early days. She told me to take it one day at a time, to be kind to myself, and to lean on my family. I intended to do just that. The days leading up to the surgery were a blur. I tried to stay busy to keep my mind occupied. I called Brian a few times to remind him about the surgery date. He always said he remembered that he would be there. The morning of the surgery finally arrived. I woke up at 5 in the morning, too anxious to sleep. I showered, dressed, and packed a small bag with a change of clothes and my phone charger. I had assumed Brian would pick me up and drive me to the hospital. But when I called him that morning, he did not answer. I called again. No answer. I texted him. "Are you on your way?" No response. By 7 in the morning, I realized he was not coming. I felt a wave of panic followed by a deep, sinking disappointment. I called a cab. I rode to the hospital alone, staring out the window at the gray September sky. When I arrived, the nurses were kind and efficient. They checked me in, took my vitals, and walked me through what to expect. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, asked if anyone was coming to be with me. I told her my son was on his way. I lied because I was embarrassed to admit the truth. I waited in the pre-op room for over an hour. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message from Brian. Nothing. Finally, they wheeled me into the operating room. The anesthesiologist told me to count backward from 10. I remember getting to 7 before everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a recovery room. My chest ached. My mouth was dry. A nurse was standing beside me, adjusting my IV. She smiled and said, "You did great. The surgery went well. How are you feeling?" I asked if anyone had come to see me. She checked the visitor log and shook her head. No one yet. Would you like me to call someone for you? I told her no. I did not want to call Brian again. I did not want to hear another excuse. A few hours later, they moved me to a regular room. I was told I could go home the next day if everything looked good. That night alone in that hospital bed, I finally heard from Brian. He sent a text message. Mom, I am so sorry. Work emergency. Cynthia had to take Tyler to the doctor. Are you okay? Can you take an Uber home tomorrow? I stared at that message for a long time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I typed back, I am fine. I will manage. I turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling until I fell asleep. The next morning, I was discharged. A nurse helped me get dressed and walked me down to the main entrance. I called a taxi and rode home in silence. My apartment felt cold and empty when I walked in. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the couch trying to process everything. The surgery was over. The tumor was removed. But the hardest part was just beginning. My oncologist had scheduled my first round of chemotherapy for early October, about 3 weeks away. In the meantime, I was supposed to rest, let my body heal, and prepare for what was coming next. I called Brian the day after I got home. He answered this time. Mom, he said, I am so glad you are okay. I am really sorry I could not be there. It was just terrible timing. I asked him if he could come visit even just for an hour. He said he would try, but that week was crazy at work. He promised to come by the following weekend. That weekend came and went. No Brian. I did not call him again. I decided to wait and see if he would reach out on his own. He did not. October arrived and with it my first chemotherapy session. I had read about what to expect: nausea, fatigue, hair loss, weakened immune system. But reading about it and experiencing it are two completely different things. The treatment center was bright and sterile, filled with rows of recliners, where patients sat hooked up to IV drips. I checked in, gave my name, and was led to a chair by the window. The nurse who would be administering my chemo introduced herself as Karen. She was in her 50s, warm and chatty, and she made me feel as comfortable as possible. The process took about 4 hours. They started with anti-nausea medication, then the chemotherapy drugs. I sat there watching the clear liquid drip slowly into my veins, wondering what it was doing inside my body. Killing the cancer, yes, but also killing parts of me. Karen checked on me frequently, asking how I felt, if I needed anything. I told her I was fine, even though I was not. Halfway through, I started to feel queasy. By the time it was over, I was exhausted and lightheaded. Karen told me the side effects would get worse over the next few days. She gave me prescriptions for nausea medication and told me to drink plenty of water, rest, and call if I had a fever. I drove myself home. I barely made it up the stairs to my apartment. I collapsed on the couch and stayed there for the rest of the day. That night, the nausea hit hard. I spent hours in the bathroom throwing up until there was nothing left. I called Brian the next morning, hoping he might come over, bring me soup, sit with me for a little while. He did not answer. I left a voicemail. Brian, it is Mom. I just had my first chemo session. I am really sick. Could you come by? Please? He texted back hours later. Sorry, Mom. Crazy busy. Hope you feel better soon. That was it. No offer to help. No visit. Just a text message. Over the next few weeks, I went through 2 more rounds of chemo. Each one was worse than the last. The nausea became constant. I could barely eat. I lost 15 pounds in a month. My hair started falling out in clumps. I would wake up to find strands all over my pillow. One morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and pulled at my hair. It came out in my hands, easy and painless, like it was not even attached anymore. I cried. Then I called a salon and made an appointment to shave it all off. If it was going to fall out anyway, I wanted to be the one in control. The stylist was kind. She did not ask questions. She just buzzed my head down to the scalp, handed me a mirror, and said, "You are beautiful." I did not feel beautiful. I felt like a stranger. But I thanked her and went home. I bought a few scarves and hats to cover my head. Winter was coming, so at least I had an excuse to wear them. I tried calling Brian again after I shaved my head. I wanted to tell him to hear his voice, to feel like I still had a son who cared. He did not answer. I did not leave a message that time. Thanksgiving was approaching, and I was hopeful that maybe, just maybe, things would be different. Holidays had always been important to our family. Surely Brian would not abandon me on Thanksgiving. I called him 2 weeks before the holiday and asked if they were coming over for dinner. There was a pause. Then Cynthia got on the phone. "Marie," she said, "we are actually going to my parents' house this year. It is kind of a tradition on their side." I felt my chest tighten. I said, "Can I come with you?" "I would love to see Tyler." Another pause. Then Cynthia said, "It is really just immediate family, Marie. You understand, right? It is a little complicated." I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, "I am immediate family. I am Brian's mother. I am Tyler's grandmother." But instead I said, "Okay, I understand." I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. That Thanksgiving, I ate a turkey sandwich alone in my apartment. I did not cry. I was too numb for tears. Christmas was even worse. I bought gifts for Tyler and mailed them to Brian's house. I never received a thank you note, a phone call, or even a text. I called on Christmas morning, hoping to at least hear Tyler's voice. Brian answered, sounded distracted, and said they were busy opening presents. He promised to call me back later. He never did. The months dragged on. Chemo every 3 weeks. Each session left me weaker than the last. I stopped driving myself to appointments because I was too exhausted and dizzy. I took cabs, or sometimes Judith would drive me. She was the only person who showed up. She would sit with me during treatments, bring me ginger tea, and help me to the car afterward. I do not know what I would have done without her. My own son, the person I had raised and loved more than anything, could not be bothered to send a text message asking how I was doing. By the spring of 2023, I had completed most of my chemotherapy. The oncologist said the scans looked good. The cancer was responding to treatment. But I still had radiation therapy ahead of me. Radiation was every day for 6 weeks. It was exhausting in a different way. The treatments themselves were quick, just a few minutes under the machine. But the cumulative effect was brutal. My skin became red and raw. I was constantly tired. I felt like I was running on empty, just going through the motions. During all of this, I heard from Brian maybe twice. Once he sent a text asking if I needed anything. I replied, "Yes, I need you." He did not respond. Another time he called on my birthday in June. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. He said happy birthday, asked how I was feeling, and then said he had to go because Tyler had soccer practice. That was it. No card, no gift. Just a rushed phone call that felt more like an obligation than genuine care. I stopped expecting anything from him after that. By the summer of 2024, I had finished all my treatments. My final scan in June showed no evidence of disease. I was in remission. The word should have filled me with joy, relief, gratitude. And in some ways it did. I had survived. I had beaten cancer. But sitting in the oncologist's office hearing those words, I felt empty. Because there was no one to celebrate with. No one to call. No one who had been there through the worst of it and could now share in the best of it. I called Brian the day I got the news. I do not know why. Maybe I still hoped he would care. He answered, and I told him, "Brian, I am in remission. The cancer is gone." There was a pause. Then he said, "That is great, Mom. I knew you could do it." I felt anger rise in my throat. I said, "You knew I could do it. You were not even here. You did not come to a single appointment. You did not call. You did not visit. For 2 years, Brian. 2 years." He sighed, sounded annoyed, and said, "Mom, do not be dramatic. I was busy. You know how it is. Work, Tyler, life. It is not like I forgot about you." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. I said, "You may not have forgotten about me, but you sure acted like I did not exist." He got defensive. He said, "I am sorry you feel that way, but you are fine now, are not you? You beat it. So why are we even having this conversation?" I could not believe what I was hearing. I said, "Because I needed you and you were not there." That is why we are having this conversation. He did not respond. I hung up. I did not cry. I was done crying over Brian. In the weeks that followed, I made a decision. I was going to live the rest of my life for myself. I was not going to wait around for my son to remember I existed. I was not going to beg for his attention or his love. I joined a cancer survivor support group and met people who understood what I had been through. I started going to yoga classes. I read books, took long walks, and spent time with Judith. I began to feel like myself again. A different version of myself maybe, but still me. Stronger in some ways. More independent. Then in mid-August, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was from a lawyer in San Diego, California. He introduced himself as Mr. Callahan and said he was handling the estate of Harold Thompson, my brother. I felt my stomach drop. I said, "What do you mean, estate? Is Harold okay?" There was a pause, and then Mr. Callahan said, "I am very sorry to inform you that Harold passed away 3 days ago. He suffered a massive stroke while playing golf. It was very sudden. He did not suffer." I could not speak. Harold was only 65. He had always been healthy, active, full of life. I had just talked to him 2 weeks earlier. He had asked how I was feeling, congratulated me on my remission, told me he was proud of me. And now he was gone. Mr. Callahan continued. He said, "I am calling because Harold left a will, and you are named as the sole beneficiary of his estate." I did not understand. I said, "What does that mean?" Mr. Callahan explained. Harold had no children, no spouse. He had named me his only sibling to inherit everything. Everything included a house in La Jolla, California, valued at approximately $2 million. It also included savings account stocks and investments totaling around $800,000. I sat down feeling dizzy. I said I had no idea. I did not know Harold had that kind of money. Mr. Callahan said Harold had been very successful in commercial real estate, but lived modestly. He was a private man. His instructions were clear. He wanted me to have it all. He said I deserved to live comfortably. I started crying. Not because of the money, but because Harold, my brother who lived across the country, and whom I only spoke to once a month, had thought of me, had cared about me, had made sure I would be taken care of. He had shown me more love in his will than my own son had shown me in 2 years. Mr. Callahan arranged for me to fly to San Diego for the funeral. It was a small service. Harold had been a quiet man with a small circle of friends. There were maybe a dozen people there, mostly colleagues and golfing buddies. I was the only family. I stood at his grave and said goodbye to the brother I wished I had spent more time with. After the service, Mr. Callahan took me to see the house. It was located in La Jolla, one of the most beautiful coastal areas in California. The house sat on a bluff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was stunning. 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows with ocean views, a modern kitchen, a pool in the backyard, and a private staircase leading down to the beach. I walked through the house in a daze. Everything was tasteful, clean, and peaceful. Mr. Callahan said Harold had bought it 5 years ago as an investment and planned to retire there. But he never got the chance. Now it was mine. I stood on the back deck looking out at the endless blue ocean, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Hope. Not hope that things would go back to the way they were, but hope that maybe, just maybe, I could start over. I could build a new life. A life where I was not waiting for people who did not care. I returned to Portland and spent the next few weeks tying up loose ends. I put my apartment on the market. It sold quickly. I packed up my belongings, donated what I did not need, and hired a moving company to transport everything to California. I did not tell Brian I was moving. I thought about it. I even drafted a text message a few times, but then I deleted it. If he cared, he would have called. If he wanted to know how I was, he would have asked. I was not going to chase him anymore. By mid-September, I was living in La Jolla. The transition was surreal. I went from a small 2-bedroom apartment in Maine to a sprawling beach house in California. The first few nights I felt out of place. The house was so big, so quiet. I wandered from room to room, unsure of where to settle. But slowly, I began to make it my own. I filled the guest rooms with furniture. I hung pictures on the walls. I bought fresh flowers for the kitchen table. I set up a reading nook on the back deck where I could watch the sunset every evening. The neighborhood was peaceful. My neighbors were mostly retirees couples who had worked their whole lives and were now enjoying their golden years. 2 houses down lived a couple named Frank and Donna. They were in their early 70s, kind and welcoming. The first week I moved in, Donna came over with a homemade pie and introduced herself. She said if I needed anything to just knock on their door. A few days later, they invited me over for dinner. We sat on their patio, ate grilled fish, and talked for hours. They asked about my life, and I told them about Harold, about the cancer, about moving across the country to start fresh. I did not mention Brian. I was not ready to talk about that yet. Frank said Harold had been a good neighbor. Quiet, respectful, always willing to lend a hand. He said Harold had mentioned me often, that he was proud of his sister, who had been a nurse for so many years. I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. Harold had thought of me, had spoken kindly of me, even from a distance. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a routine. I woke up early, made coffee, and walked along the beach. The sound of the waves, the salty air, the wide open sky. It was healing in a way I had not anticipated. I started taking yoga classes at a studio nearby. I joined a local book club. I volunteered at a cancer support center in San Diego, sharing my story with newly diagnosed patients and offering them the encouragement I wished I had received. I felt lighter, freer. For the first time in years, I was not carrying the weight of other people's expectations. I was not waiting for my phone to ring. I was not wondering why my son did not love me enough to show up. I was just living, and it felt good. I thought about Brian sometimes. I wondered if he had tried to reach me, if he had gone to my old apartment and found it empty. But I had kept my phone number, and it had been 2 months since I moved. He had not called. Not once. That told me everything I needed to know. Then one morning in early November, everything changed. I was sitting on the back deck drinking my coffee and reading a novel when the doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. I set down my book and walked to the front door. When I opened it, I froze. Standing there with a bright smile on her face was Cynthia, my daughter-in-law. The woman who had told me I could not come to Thanksgiving because it was immediate family only. The woman who had not visited me once during 2 years of cancer treatment. She looked perfectly put together. Hairstyled, makeup done, wearing an expensive-looking dress and heels. She said, "Marie, oh my God, I finally found you." I just stood there, unable to speak. She continued, "We have been so worried. You disappeared. We called your old number, went to your apartment, but you were gone. No one knew where you were." I found my voice and said, "I moved." She looked past me into the house and her eyes widened. She said, "This place is incredible. Is this where you live now? How did you— this must have cost a fortune." I did not answer. I did not invite her in. But Cynthia, being Cynthia, walked past me anyway, stepping into the foyer and looking around like she owned the place. She said, "Marie, this house is stunning. The view. Oh my God, is that the ocean?" She walked toward the back windows, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She turned to me and said, "How did you afford this? No offense, but you were living in that little apartment in Portland. Where did this come from?" I crossed my arms and said, "My brother left it to me. Harold passed away in August." Her face shifted, a quick flash of something, surprise maybe, or calculation. She said, "Oh, I am so sorry to hear that. I had no idea. But wow, Marie, this is amazing. You must be so happy." I did not respond. I just watched her. She walked through the living room, the kitchen, out onto the back deck. She stood there looking at the pool, the view, the private beach access. She turned back to me and said, "This place must be worth what, a couple million?" I said something like that. She whistled low and said, "Well, you certainly lucked out." I felt my jaw tighten. Lucked out. As if inheriting a house from my dead brother was some kind of lottery win. I said, "Why are you here, Cynthia?" She turned, smiled, and said, "I came to see you, of course. We missed you, Marie. Brian and Tyler miss you so much." I almost laughed. I said, "Really? Where are they now?" She said, "Oh, they are back in Portland. I came alone. I actually hired a private investigator to find you. It took a few weeks, but here I am." She said it like it was something to be proud of, like she had done me a favor. I said you hired a PI to find me, but you could not visit me once when I had cancer. Her smile faltered just a bit. She said, Marie, I know. I know we were not there for you the way we should have been. And I am so, so sorry. Things were just really hard for us. Brian's job was insane. Tyler was struggling in school. I was overwhelmed with work. It was not personal. I stared at her. I said I was dying, and it was not personal. She shifted uncomfortably and said, Okay, I know that sounds bad, but we are here now, right? We want to make things right. Actually, I have been thinking. Brian and I have been talking about moving to California. His company has an office in San Diego. And this house, well, it is so big. You are here all alone. Maybe we could move in with you. We could help you take care of the place. Tyler would love the beach. And honestly, Marie, you are getting older. You just went through cancer. What if something happens? You need family around. There it was. The real reason she was here. Not to apologize, not to reconnect, but to move into my house, to take what was mine. I felt a cold, hard anger settle in my chest. I said, where was my family when I actually needed them? She tried to recover. She said, I know. And that is why we want to be here now. To make up for lost time. We could start over, Marie. Be a real family again. I shook my head and said no. She blinked. She said no, I said you need to leave. Her face changed. The fake sweetness disappeared. She said, Marie, be reasonable. You are all alone in this giant house. You do not have anyone. At least we are offering to be here for you. I said, I do not need you. I do not need anything from you. She said, fine. I tried to be nice. But you know what, Brian deserves part of this. You are his mother. Legally, he might have a claim to Harold's estate. I smiled cold and calm. I said Harold left everything to me. Not Brian. The will is ironclad. My lawyer already confirmed it. There is nothing Brian can claim. She looked furious now. She said, this is ridiculous. You are going to die alone in this big house, Marie. You have no one. At least we were trying to help. I walked to the front door and opened it. I said, you were not trying to help me. You were trying to help yourself. Now get out. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard, her face red. Then she grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. She stopped in front of me and said, you will regret this. Brian is going to hear about this. I said, tell him whatever you want. Tell him his mother said he is welcome to visit any time. But you? Cynthia are never welcome here again. She walked out and I closed the door behind her. I stood there, my heart pounding, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt powerful. I had stood my ground. I had said no. And it felt good. That afternoon, Brian called. I knew he would. His voice was tight with anger. He said, Mom, what the hell? Cynthia told me you kicked her out. I stayed calm. I said I did not kick her out. I asked her to leave my home. He said she flew all the way to California to see you. She was trying to help. I said she flew to California to see if she could move into my house. There is a difference. He said that is not true. We just thought it would be nice to be closer to you. I said, Brian, where were you when I had cancer? There was silence. I continued. I said, where were you when I was in the hospital? When I was doing chemo? When I lost my hair? When I spent Thanksgiving and Christmas alone? He said, Mom, I told you. I was busy. I said too busy for your dying mother, but not too busy to fly across the country when you heard about a $2 million house. He said that is not fair. I said what is not fair is that you abandoned me. What is not fair is that you let Cynthia convince you I did not matter. What is not fair is that I fought for my life for 2 years and my own son did not care. He tried to argue. He said I did care, I did not know how to handle it. I said you did not try. That is the truth. You did not try. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Mom, I am sorry. I really am. Can we start over? I said, I do not know Brian. I honestly do not know if I can trust you again. He said, What about Tyler? Do not you want to see your grandson? My heart ached. I said, of course I do. But I am not going to let you use him to manipulate me. He said, I am not manipulating you. I said, then prove it. Come visit me. Just you and Tyler. No Cynthia. No agenda. Just visit your mother because you want to. He did not answer right away. I said, when you are ready to do that, call me. Until then, I need space. I hung up. I sat down on the couch, my hands shaking. Part of me felt guilty. He was my son, my only child. But another part of me felt relief. I had told the truth. I had set a boundary. I had stopped pretending everything was okay when it was not. That evening I called Judith. I told her everything. About Cynthia showing up, about the confrontation, about Brian's phone call. She listened quietly, then said, you did the right thing, Marie. People who were not there for you in your darkest moments do not get to benefit from your brightest. I said, but he is my son. What if I am being too harsh? She said, you are not being harsh. You are being honest. You set a boundary. That is healthy. She told me about her own experience. She had siblings who never visited her during her cancer treatment. But when she inherited money from an aunt, suddenly they all came around asking for loans, for help, for favors. She had cut them off. She said, I learned that blood does not automatically mean loyalty. Real family shows up. The rest are just relatives. Her words resonated with me. Over the next few days, I thought a lot about what I wanted. Did I want Brian back in my life? Yes. But not like this. Not with conditions, not with Cynthia pulling the strings, not with the expectation that I owed them something. I wanted a real relationship, one built on love, not obligation. One where he showed up because he wanted to, not because he thought he might inherit something. I decided to take action. I called my lawyer, Mr. Callahan, and scheduled a meeting. I flew back to San Diego and met him at his office. I told him I wanted to update my will. I explained the situation with Brian. Mr. Callahan listened carefully, then said, what would you like to do? I said. If Brian and I reconcile, if he proves he genuinely wants a relationship with me, then I want him to inherit. But Cynthia gets nothing. If we do not reconcile, if he continues to prioritize money over his mother, then I want everything to go to charity, specifically to cancer research and patient support programs. Mr. Callahan nodded and said, that is very clear. I will draft the paperwork. A week later, I signed the new will. It felt right. It felt fair. I also decided to reach out to Brian one last time. I sent him an email. I wrote, Brian, I love you. I will always love you. You are my son. But I cannot have a relationship built on pretense. If you want to be part of my life, it has to be real. No expectations of inheritance, no ulterior motives, just a mother and son who care about each other. The door is open, but you have to walk through it honestly. I sent it and waited. Days passed, then a week, then 2 weeks. No response. I was not surprised, but I was sad. I grieved the relationship I thought we had. I grieved the son I thought I knew. And then slowly, I let it go. It is now May of 2025. I have been living in California for 8 months. My life is fuller than it has been in years. I wake up every morning to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. I drink my coffee on the deck, watching pelicans dive for fish. I swim in the pool. I walk on the beach. I have made friends here, real friends. Frank and Donna invite me over for dinner every week. I joined a watercolor painting class and discovered I actually enjoy it. My paintings are not great, but they are mine, and that is enough. I volunteer 3 days a week at the San Diego Cancer Support Center. I talk to newly diagnosed patients, hold their hands, and tell them my story. I tell them they are not alone, even when it feels like they are. I tell them to fight not just for their lives, but for themselves, to set boundaries, to let go of people who do not show up, to surround themselves with love, even if it comes from unexpected places. It feels good to help others. It feels purposeful. In April, something unexpected happened. Brian called. Not Cynthia, just Brian. He said he wanted to come visit. Just him and Tyler. No hidden agenda. He said he had been thinking a lot about what I wrote in my email. He said he was ashamed of how he had acted. He said he wanted to make it right if I would let him. I was cautious. I said, Brian, I need you to understand something. I am not the same person I was 2 years ago. Cancer changed me. Being abandoned by you changed me. I am not going to pretend everything is fine just because you finally decided to show up. He said, I know. I do not expect you to. I just want a chance. I agreed. They came 2 weeks later. Brian flew into San Diego with Tyler. I picked them up from the airport. Seeing Tyler again after so long broke something open inside me. He had grown so much. He was 8 now, taller, his face more defined. He ran to me and hugged me tight. He said, Grandma, I missed you. I held him and cried. Brian stood back watching. When Tyler let go, Brian stepped forward. He said, Hi, Mom. I said hi. It was awkward at first. We drove back to the house in near silence. But once we got there, things began to thaw. Tyler ran around the house amazed by the pool, the beach, the ocean view. Brian and I sat on the deck and talked. Really talked. He apologized. He said he had let Cynthia control too much of his life, that he had been a coward, that he was ashamed. He said losing me, or almost losing me, had woken him up. I listened. I did not forgive him immediately. Forgiveness is not something you give all at once. It is something you build piece by piece. But I told him I was willing to try. We spent the weekend together. We walked on the beach. We played board games with Tyler. We cooked dinner together. It was not perfect. There were moments of tension, of unspoken hurt, but it was a start. When they left, Brian hugged me and said, I will do better, Mom. I promise. I said I hope so, because I am not going through this again. He nodded. Since then, we have talked once a week. He calls me every Sunday. We video chat so I can see Tyler. It is not what it was before. But maybe that is okay. Maybe we are building something new, something stronger, something based on truth instead of obligation. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if Brian and I will ever fully repair what was broken. But I know this. I am no longer waiting for him to validate my worth. I am no longer defining myself by whether or not he shows up. I have learned something important over these past few years. Cancer taught me that life is short, but being abandoned by my family taught me something even more valuable. It taught me that I deserve people who show up, who care, who do not wait until there is something in it for them. I have built a life here in California that is mine. I have friends who check on me. I have a home that brings me peace. I have purpose. I have survived. Not just cancer, but the heartbreak of realizing that the people you love most might not love you the way you need them to. Harold gave me more than a house. He gave me a second chance, a chance to start over, a chance to live for myself. I think about him often. I wish I had told him more often how much he meant to me. But I hope he knew. I hope wherever he is, he knows that his gift changed my life, that it saved me in a way that medicine never could. I am 61 years old. I have survived cancer. I have survived abandonment. I have survived the deepest kind of loneliness. And I am still here, still standing, still living. And that I have come to realize is enough. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been let down by the people you thought would always be there? Have you ever had to choose between holding on and letting go? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear your story. And if this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who is fighting their own battle, who feels alone, who needs to know that it is okay to set boundaries and walk away from people who do not value you. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope that wherever you are, whatever you are facing, you remember this. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be valued. You deserve people who show up. And if they do not, it is okay to walk away. It is okay to choose yourself. I wish you peace, strength, and the courage to live the life you deserve. Take care.